In the city's most elite restaurant, a young black waiter serves food to an old man in torn clothes. Suddenly, the man gasps for air and collapses. His fork slips, the plate shatters against the floor, and chaos erupts. The manager rushes in and without hesitation points at the waiter. It's his fault. Within hours, the restaurant's golden image will shatter, and the truth about that homeless man will shake the entire city. Before we continue, tell us what time it is and where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. Daniel Carter had worked at the Golden Door for 3 years, 2 months and 17 days. Every shift felt longer than the last, a slow eternity where he was invisible to everyone except the rare customer who looked him in the eye. The Golden Door wasn't just a restaurant, it was a monument to money. Brass polished like gold, chandeliers glittering with salaries, marble floors from Italy, tablecloths so crisp they could stand on their own. From the street, it looked like heaven. Inside, it felt more like judgment. At exactly 4:45, Daniel pushed through the employee door 15 minutes early, like always. His grandmother Rose had taught him that since he was 16, baby, being on time means being early. You gotta work twice as hard to get half as far, but keep your head up and your heart clean. She'd been gone 2 years, but her voice still followed him through every shift, a whisper of grace in a world that rarely showed any. Well, look who's early again. Roger Hammond's voice always carried the scent of coffee, cigarettes, and contempt. The man ran the Golden Door like a dictator with a grudge. "Good evening, Mr. Hammond," Daniel said, buttoning his vest, ready for the 5 o'clock shift. "You've got Section C tonight. Don't screw it up. We've got real guests coming, people who matter." Section C, the graveyard corner, where they seated walk-ins, latecomers, and anyone Roger decided didn't belong in paradise. Daniel had served that corner for 2 years straight. The pre-shift meeting was short. Orders barked, praises handed out like rations, never to Daniel. Then the doors opened and the performance began. Silverware clinked. Wine glasses caught the light like tiny suns. Conversations hummed with money and ego, and Daniel, steady, invisible Daniel, glided through it all with quiet precision, refilling glasses before anyone asked, clearing plates without a sound. The kind of perfection no one noticed until it wasn't there. At 7:30, Roger appeared at his elbow, face flushed. "Carter, Section C is a mess. You don't have what it takes for a place like this. Maybe you'd be happier flipping burgers." Daniel swallowed hard, his voice steady. "I'll handle it, sir." And he did. Because that's what Daniel Carter did, he handled it. The insults, the hours, the weight of trying to stay dignified in a place that refused to see him. By 9:45, the last tables were clearing out, chandeliers dimming one by one. He was ready to clock out, maybe catch the late train home. Then the front door opened one last time. Daniel was clearing table 29 when Roger's voice sliced through the fading chatter. "I'm sorry, sir, but our kitchen closes at 10. We're not accepting guests for the evening." At the entrance stood a man in a worn brown jacket, hair gray and unkempt, a faded backpack slung over one shoulder. He looked exhausted, the kind of tired that lived deep in the bones. "Please," the man said quietly but steadily. "I've been traveling all day, I just need something to eat. Anything. I'll order quick, I promise." Roger crossed his arms, his expression one of barely concealed disgust. "The Golden Door has standards, sir. We require proper attire. And as I said, we're closing." Daniel felt something stir in his chest. He knew that look in Roger's eyes. This wasn't about closing time or dress codes. It was about the man's appearance, his worn clothes, his backpack, the assumption that someone who looked like that didn't belong in a place like this. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn wallet. "I can pay. I have cash. I don't want trouble, just a meal. Please." Roger's expression flickered. Daniel could see the calculation happening. Cash was cash, and the Golden Door's policy was officially that they served anyone who could pay and maintained appropriate behavior. The dress code was technically discretionary. "Fine," Roger said after a long pause, his tone dripping with disdain. "But you sit in the back section, and you order immediately. We close in 15 minutes. Thank you so much." Roger turned, his face twisted with contempt, and his eyes landed on Daniel. Of course, Section C, the back corner. Where they put people like this man, people Roger deemed unworthy of the main dining room. "Carter, one more table. Make it quick and get him out of here." Daniel nodded and approached the entrance. Up close, the man looked to be in his late 50s or early 60s. His face was weathered with deep lines around his eyes and mouth. But his eyes themselves were kind, a soft gray that reminded Daniel of early morning fog. There was something about him that didn't quite match his appearance. A certain dignity in how he carried himself despite the worn clothes. "Good evening, sir. Right this way, please." "Thank you," the man said, his voice warm with genuine gratitude. "I really appreciate this. I know it's late." "It's no problem at all, sir. We're happy to have you." And Daniel meant it. Unlike Roger, unlike the other servers, Daniel saw a person who needed help, not an inconvenience to be dismissed. Daniel led him to table 35, the furthest table from everything, tucked into a corner that most guests never even noticed. But Daniel didn't rush. He didn't make the man feel unwelcome. He pulled out the chair, handed him a menu with the same care he'd show any guest, and gave him a genuine smile. "Can I start you with something to drink, sir?" "Just water, please, and maybe some coffee if that's not too much trouble." "No trouble at all. I'll be right back." As Daniel walked away, he could feel eyes on him, other servers watching, whispering among themselves. He caught snippets. "Did you see that guy? Can't believe Roger let him in. Probably doesn't have enough for a tip. So glad I don't have Section C." Daniel ignored them and headed to the service station. He filled a water glass with fresh ice, started a fresh pot of coffee, not the old stuff they'd been serving all night, but fresh, and grabbed a bread basket with warm rolls. Small touches that showed respect, that treated this customer like he mattered. When he returned to table 35, the man was studying the menu with an expression Daniel couldn't quite read. There was something thoughtful in his gaze, like he was seeing more than just menu items. "Have you decided, sir? What would you recommend?" The man looked up at him directly, making eye contact in a way that felt genuine. "What's really good here? Not what's expensive or impressive, what's actually good." It was a simple question, but Daniel noticed the way he'd asked it. He was testing something maybe. Or just being honest about what he wanted. "Honestly, sir, the roasted chicken is excellent. Chef Andre does it with herbs and lemon. It's simple, but when it's done right, it's one of the best things on the menu. Comes with roasted vegetables and potatoes." The man smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "That sounds perfect. I'll have that. Thank you for the honest recommendation." "Excellent choice, sir. I'll put that in right away." Daniel headed to the kitchen where the mood was decidedly sour. The staff was already cleaning, preparing to close. One more meal was not welcome. "Last order." Daniel called out, sliding the ticket into the queue. Chef Andre snatched it up and scowled. "Roasted chicken. At 9:50 at night, who orders chicken this late?" "A paying customer," Daniel said evenly. "A bum more like," Roger said, appearing in the doorway. His voice was loud enough that several kitchen staff turned to look. "I should never have let him in. But he had cash, so here we are. Make the plate, Andre. And make it fast. I want him out of here as soon as possible." Andre grumbled something in French and turned to his stations. But Daniel noticed something odd, something that made his stomach clench with unease. The chef's movements were hurried, almost careless. He grabbed what looked like a chicken breast from the walk-in cooler, but instead of taking it from the fresh stock they'd been using all evening, he pulled it from a container in the back, one that looked like it had been sitting there for days. The vegetables came from a similar source, not the fresh, organic produce the Golden Door proudly advertised, but pre-cut vegetables that looked wilted and tired. Daniel felt a prickle of concern, but he said nothing. He wasn't in charge of the kitchen. He just served what they gave him. But he made a mental note. Something wasn't right here. 10 minutes later, Andre slammed a plate onto the pass. "Chicken for the homeless guy. Get it out of my kitchen." Daniel picked up the plate carefully. It looked presentable enough. Golden brown chicken, vegetables arranged artfully, a garnish of fresh herbs on top that almost covered the inferior quality underneath. But something about it felt wrong. The chicken looked dry. The vegetables looked limp despite the presentation. He carried the plate back to table 35, his concern growing. The man looked up as he approached, and his face brightened with that same genuine warmth. "That looks wonderful. Thank you so much." "You're very welcome, sir." Daniel set the plate down carefully. "Please, let me know if you need anything at all. I'll be right over there." "Thank you. You've been very kind." Daniel stepped back to give him privacy, but he didn't go far. From his position at the service station, he could observe the table while staying available. Most other tables had cleared out by now, just a few stragglers finishing wine, signing checks, gathering belongings. The man at table 35 ate slowly, deliberately, like someone who'd learned not to take meals for granted. He cut his chicken into careful pieces, savored each bite. There was something almost poignant about the way he appreciated the meal, despite its questionable quality. It made Daniel wonder about his story. Where had he come from? Where was he going? What had brought him to the Golden Door at 9:45 on a Tuesday night, wearing worn clothes and carrying everything in a backpack? Grandma Rose had taught him never to make assumptions. Baby, you never know what someone's been through. That person on the street corner, that woman arguing with the cashier, that man who looks like he's given up on everything. They're all fighting battles you can't see. You show them kindness anyway. You show them respect, because one day you might need someone to do the same for you. About 15 minutes into the meal, something changed. The man put down his fork. He reached for his water glass and took a long drink, but his hand was shaking slightly. Then he put his hand to his throat. His face had gone pale, and a thin sheen of sweat appeared on his forehead. Daniel was moving before he even registered the decision. Sir? Are you all right? The man shook his head, trying to speak, but the words came out in a rasp. Something's wrong. I don't feel. His eyes met Daniel's, and there was fear there. Real fear. Can't breathe right. And then he slumped forward, his head nearly hitting the table. Time seemed to slow down and speed up all at once. Daniel caught the man before he could fall completely, easing him back in his chair, and then carefully to the floor. The man's breathing was shallow, rapid. His skin had taken on a grayish color. Sweat covered his forehead. Someone call 911, Daniel shouted, his voice cutting through the quiet restaurant. The remaining diners turned to stare. One woman gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Roger came running from the direction of his office, his face a mixture of fury and fear. What happened? What did you do? Roger grabbed Daniel's shoulder roughly, trying to pull him away. He's sick. He needs an ambulance. Daniel shrugged off Roger's hand and knelt beside the man, loosening his collar to help him breathe. Sir? Can you hear me? Stay with me. Help is coming. The man's eyes fluttered open, focusing on Daniel with surprising clarity despite his obvious distress. Hurts, he whispered. Stomach. Can't breathe. You're going to be okay. Just stay still. The ambulance is coming. Brittany, one of the other servers, appeared with a phone pressed to her ear. They're on their way. They said 5 to 7 minutes. Those minutes felt like hours. Daniel stayed beside the man, talking to him quietly, keeping him conscious and calm. He grabbed a clean napkin and dabbed the sweat from the man's forehead, held his hand when the man reached out, squeezing it weakly. Small gestures of comfort that came naturally to Daniel, even as chaos erupted around them. The other diners had stopped eating entirely, watching the drama unfold. Some were recording on their phones. Roger paced back and forth, running his hands through his thinning hair. This is a disaster. This is a complete disaster. If this gets out, if people think there's something wrong with our food. Roger was more concerned about the restaurant's reputation than the man who might be dying. Maybe you should be more concerned about him, Daniel said quietly, not looking up from the man on the floor. Don't you dare lecture me, Carter. This is your section, your table, your responsibility. The ambulance arrived 7 minutes later. 2 paramedics rushed in with their equipment, and Daniel reluctantly stepped back to give them room. They worked quickly, checking vitals, asking questions, starting an IV line. What did he eat? One paramedic asked. The roasted chicken special, Daniel said. He'd only had maybe a quarter of it when he started showing symptoms. Any known allergies? He didn't mention any to me. Any other medical conditions you're aware of? I don't know, sir. He just came in for dinner. They loaded the man onto a stretcher, working to stabilize him. As they prepared to wheel him out, one of the paramedics turned to Roger. Someone should come with us to the hospital. We'll need information, and he's in no condition to provide it. Roger looked around the room, his eyes calculating. Then they landed on Daniel. Carter served him. Carter can go, but Daniel was already moving. He grabbed his jacket from behind the service station. I'm coming. Which hospital? St. Mary's Medical Center. Wait, Carter, you're still on shift. Roger started. Daniel turned to face his manager, and something in his expression must have been fierce because Roger actually took a step back. That man might be seriously ill, from food we served him. I'm going to make sure he's okay. You can fire me if you want. I don't care, but I'm going. He followed the paramedics out, not waiting for Roger's response. At the hospital, the emergency room was a bright, sterile chaos. They wheeled the man directly back to a treatment room, while Daniel was directed to the waiting area. A tired administrator gave him a clipboard of forms. Fill out what you can. Leave blank what you don't know. Daniel did his best, but there was almost nothing he could provide. No name, no contact information, no medical history, no next of kin, just the bare facts. Arrived at restaurant at approximately 9:45, ordered roasted chicken, ate about a quarter of his meal before showing signs of severe distress. The man was listed as John Doe, unknown patient. Daniel sat in the hard plastic chairs of the waiting room, surrounded by other worried people. A mother with a feverish child, an elderly man holding his chest, a teenager with a badly swollen ankle, each person wrapped in their own crisis, their own fear. Time passed slowly, 1 hour, then 2. Daniel called the restaurant, but no one answered. They'd probably closed by now. Everyone gone home. He should go home too. He'd done what he could. But something kept him in that chair, some sense that he couldn't just leave this man alone, unknown, with no one to care whether he lived or died. At 1:30 in the morning, a doctor finally emerged. She was in her 50s, with tired eyes and the weary bearing of someone who'd seen too much suffering. Are you here for our John Doe, the gentleman from the restaurant? Daniel stood quickly. Yes, ma'am. How is he? He's stable now, but it was touch and go for a while. It appears to be severe food poisoning, a particularly aggressive bacterial infection. The symptoms came on unusually fast, which suggests a high bacterial load in whatever he ingested. We've got him on IV antibiotics and fluids. He should recover, but he needs to stay for observation, at least 48 hours, possibly longer. Daniel felt relief wash over him, followed immediately